Hello and welcome to the news on NTA International. I am Dennis Adigunloye. Let's begin with the headlines. British Nigerian Kemi Badenoch emerges new leader of UK's Conservative Party. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump heighten campaigns in final weekend of most tense US presidential campaign. And federal government to eradicate poverty and boost food sufficiency through a Cressel project. We begin in the United Kingdom, where British Nigerian Kemi Badenoch is being elected as the new leader of the UK Conservative Party, defeating Robert Jenrick in the final round of voting. Ms. Badenoch, who was raised in Nigeria, became the first black woman to lead a major political party in the UK. The final results saw Ms. Badenoch win 53,806 votes to defeat Mr. Jenrick, who scored 41,388 votes. She takes over from Rishi Sunak, the former UK Prime Minister, who led the Conservatives to their worst ever election defeat in July. Badenoch said she wants to have a new shadow cabinet in place before Tuesday, when the first shadow cabinet meeting under her leadership is due to take place, and the party needs clear policies and a clear plan for implementing them. During her campaign, Kemi Badenoch vowed to return the Conservatives to first principles and launch a series of reviews in the coming months to shape a new policy platform. She is the sixth Tory leader in less than 8.5 years and faces the challenge of uniting a fractured party. And to the United States, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump enter the final weekend of the most tense U.S. presidential campaign of modern times, with a flurry of swing state rallies that will test their stamina and ability to persuade the country's last undecided voters. Harris, bidding to become the country's first woman president, will use rallies in Georgia, North Carolina, and Michigan to drive home her message that Trump is a threat to U.S. democracy. Trump seeking a sensational return to the White House after losing in 2020 and then becoming the first presidential nominee to have been convicted of crimes, promises a radical right-wing makeover of the government and aggressive trade wars to promote his policy of America First. The 78-year-old, who rallied in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, late Friday, just miles from Harris Event Center, will all but cross paths with her again as he makes whistle stops in North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Their frenetic schedule will run right into Monday, culminating in late-night rallies in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for Trump and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for Harris. Election day is Tuesday, but Americans have been voting early for weeks, with more than 70 million ballots already cast, including a record 4 million in Georgia, where Democrats seek to pull out all the stops to keep the state in their column. Opinion polls continue to show a tied race, particularly in the 7 battleground states, likely to determine the result in the U.S. Electoral College system, leaving the Republican businessman and his 60-year-old Democratic rival fighting hard to peel off even slivers of support from one another's camps. Harris, currently the country's vice president, is doing that by appealing to centrist voters and propelling her base to the polls with a robust ground game and get out the vote effort. Now, the world's biggest nature protection conference has agreed in Cali, Colombia, to create a permanent body to represent the interests of indigenous people under the UN's Biodiversity Convention. Francis Udojo has details.
Representatives of indigenous peoples, many in traditional dress and headgear, broke out in cheers and chants as 196 countries agreed on a subsidiary body dedicated to matters of relevance to indigenous peoples and local communities. It was the first major breakthrough for the 16th Conference of Parties, COP16, to the UN's Convention on Biodiversity, which opened in Cali nearly 2 weeks ago and went deep into extra time Friday, as delegates clashed on ways to raise funding for plans to preserve nature,
which is the institutional arrangements for the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities in the work undertaken under the Convention on Biodiversity.
Delegates also agreed on a specific role for Afro-descendant communities in the new subsidiary body.
So it is adopted.
Though several details have yet to be ironed out. Francis Udojo, NTA News.
The United Nations has warned of famine aggravated by conflicts and climate shocks. Severe food crises threaten hundreds of thousands of people in vulnerable areas, including Palestinian territories. And Sudan and the South meet to discuss election postponements. Kulu Mohammed has details.
Conflicts, economic instability and climate shock combined with reduced funding for emergency food and agricultural assistance are driving alarming levels of acute food insecurity, the UN report warned.
We are facing the largest humanitarian crisis since the creation of the United Nations. Now, more than 20 million people across 4 countries face starvation and famine.
We also see the risk of famine in Palestine, particularly the Gaza Strip, and the drivers largely are linked to the conflict as well as armed violence.
Immediate scale-up intervention is needed to prevent further deterioration in already vulnerable regions. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Programme say acute food insecurity is projected to worsen across 16 hunger hotspots during the next 6 months in 14 countries and 2 regions. In other news, head of the UN mission in South Sudan say a new plan is needed to restore the confidence in South Sudan's leadership. Florence Agiba, a youth representative, shared her disappointment, saying, "While we acknowledge the challenges that led to the extension of transitional period, we cannot help but feel a sense of disappointment and frustration. 2 years is indeed a long time for a generation that has grown up in conflict. It is 2 years of uncertainty and 2 years of delayed dream."
It's important that we are going to have another period of 2 years. This will give the current transitional government to have, its all the remaining provisions in the agreement implemented, so that the country will have elections by 2026 without any problems.
The people must trust in the security sector. Why? So that they feel secure, and those who took refuge in neighboring countries can feel comfortable to voluntarily and in a dignified manner come back.
While announcing the extension in September, the government cited uncompleted critical tasks. Kulu Muhammad, NTA News.
Meanwhile, environmentalists across the world are highlighting the fact that cities are at the forefront of the climate crisis. A group of young people in Nairobi are transforming their neighborhood while pushing for greater environmental action.
Deep inside the crowded Kibera settlement in Kenya's capital, an unexpected burst of green pops up. A few years ago, this was a dump site full of residents' garbage, but now it's a vegetable garden feeding these very same residents. Growing up in Kibera, these young people observed as massive dump sites sprung up near their homes. With their Mtaa Safi or Clean Neighborhood initiative, they are actively trying to turn things around.
We came up with a garbage collection initiative where we charged houses like 10 shillings per household, and we grew up to 700 households where we collect the garbage.
But the question of where to take the garbage lingered. They eventually found a partner to help them recycle the collected plastic. Still, human waste was continuing to end up in the nearby river, so the group secured and renovated a set of washrooms and now charge the public 5 Kenya shillings, the equivalent of less than 10 US cents.
Our motivation was just to see a cleaner and a better neighborhood where people respect the environment and they have like a conservation mindset. And we decided to start by ourselves.
Their initiatives, they tell us, feed into each other. Garbage collection takes waste off the streets. The water and sanitation project reduces human waste in the river, while the garden transforms dump sites and feeds the people. In just under 4 months, this little garden has already yielded 3 bountiful harvests, and it is just one in a sea of possible solutions, as the young people here tell us that they are seeking to drive climate action and shape urban futures. While Africa has contributed negligibly to climate change, the UN has found that it is the most vulnerable region in the world. The continent lacks the resources to buffer itself fully from the impact of the changing climate. This is why members of the initiative say they represent young people seeking to safeguard their future.
As a youth, I believe that there's a lot of ideas and a willingness to learn from all the youths globally. So it's great to listen to them and give them the privilege and support in terms of resources to actualize these ideas and the goals that they have.
The collective's work is slowly gaining recognition and awards. In time, they hope to scale up and take their initiatives across the country and to other African countries grappling with similar problems. The little garden incubates their dreams, holding possible solutions to a greener future.
Elsewhere, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has announced the death toll in the country's worst floods for a generation has hit 211. The amount of rain, which usually falls on most of the Spanish cities in 10 years, came down in just over 8 days this year. Kulu Mohammed reports.
Emergency workers and volunteers are on site in flood-hit areas in Valencia, Spain. The flood-tossed vehicles collapsed bridges and covered towns with mud since October 29th, and the European country is deadliest of such disasters in decades. Fears are growing as dozens are still missing and hopes of finding survivors are fading. Spanish police searched through garages in shoulder-high water levels for people who could have been trapped in the flooding that has left hundreds dead. People gather at Valencia's football stadium to donate supplies and volunteer support for victims of the flood. In the small Spanish town of Chiva, west of Valencia, the destruction left by the once-in-a-generation floods is still very visible. Emergency services work to restore the city while volunteers try to help in any way they can. Kolo Muhammad, NTA News.
Meanwhile, the Federal Republic of Nigeria is deeply saddened by the tragic news of the destructive flash floods that hit eastern Spain on Tuesday, October 29th, resulting in the loss of over 200 lives and many more still missing. In a solidarity with the people of Spain during this difficult time, Nigeria extends its condolence to the families of the victims. Meanwhile, a statement by the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Ichiabu Obe, commiserates with Serbia over the tragic incident at a railway station in the Serbian town of Novi Sad on November 1st, which resulted in the death of 8 people, leaving 2 others hospitalized. The statement points out that Nigeria's thoughts and prayers are with those affected by these tragedies. In other news, beneficiaries of the federal government's life-changing intervention in Itahi Okene local government area of Kogi State are optimistic about the stabilization of degraded landscapes and channelization of water from dry season farming. Genuine efforts of the federal government's Cressel project will eradicate poverty and boost food sufficiency. This was during the Cressel implementation assessment mission to the area. Charles Alpha reports.
Nigerian government initiative, World Bank supported, but community-focused and people-oriented, describe the kind of intervention being carried out here by Cressel in Okene, Kogi State. Some of these women groups are beneficiaries of the community revolving funds who have used such funds to empower themselves with this cassava value chain and processing center.
Who are seen here today is a benefit to us, not just with the member, but the entire community, because in the past, they don't know that you can process maize into semo locally.
could not, before the next day, there was nothing on the ground. As we are producing, people were here lining up in queue to purchase, to buy.
You have shown demonstration of commitment. Thank you. You have shown what we treat as ownership of investment. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't support you to take this forward.
Issa Yakubu used to be a seasonal farmer, but now he is an all-year-rounder. Together, he and members of his cluster are taking advantage of the channelization of water and a kind of farming method, agrisol, the agroclimatic resilience in semi-arid landscapes the World Bank and state governments have introduced to combat hunger and malnutrition.
I'm not telling lies. Follow me to my farm and see what they are up to.
Initially, when the rain falls, you have a crisis. Now, there's nothing like that.
The excitement written on the faces of the beneficiaries actually gives us this impetus and satisfaction that this project is on course.
Okene, being one of the catchment areas, is suffering from gully erosion that has not only destroyed buildings but claimed lives. Today, the Etahi gully erosion is being addressed with construction and channelization already ongoing, with the Agrisol and World Bank team urging the people to take advantage, own the project for their safety, survival and maintenance. Charles Alpha, NTA News.
Let's take a quick break now. More reports in a moment. Stay with us.
World where your potential isn't limited by your bank account, where your financial dreams can become reality. That world is here with the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation scheme, Credico. Credico is one of President Tinubu's initiatives designed to put the power of consumer credit in the hands of working Nigerians. Here to help you achieve your goals, whether it's providing for your family or expanding your home or business. Visit www.credico.ng today for details. This is the renewed hope.
Thanks for staying with us. Now, empowering women is not just a matter of social justice, but also a catalyst for national development. First Lady Oluremi Tinubu emphasized this at an APC Women National Summit and Dialogue in Abuja. Ian Ray John has details.
Senator Oluremi Tinubu, CON. Gathered here are members of the women wing of the ruling party, the All Progressives Congress. Their convergence at this national summit in Abuja is to discuss identified challenges and opportunities for enhancing the profile of the APC in Nigeria, with the theme Empowering Women for Leadership and Nation Building. The First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, led the charge in reminding women in the country to key into the Renewed Hope agenda to improve their economic fortunes.
The Renewed Hope agenda of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR places strong emphasis on creating opportunities for women to thrive economically, socially, and politically. In this administration, we have witnessed increased representation of women in key positions within our party and government.
One of the greatest responsibilities we have as women leaders is to empower the next generation of female leaders.
Let us envision a world where every girl knows that she can be a leader.
Women are the foundations of the nation. Therefore, they are the foundation of the house. Without a strong foundation, the country would not be built strongly.
We, the women, the First Lady of the nation advised us and told us what we should do. I think now she has kind of gingered us up to go out and take our rightful positions.
The program has been very impactful and it has been very insightful.
Other stakeholders at the event emphasized the importance of women participation in political decision-making. In Abuja, Ian Ray John, NTA News.
For 3 decades, the Daughters of Abraham Foundation has been transforming lives of women and girls who are survivors of human trafficking and gender-based violence. Elizabeth Omori reports that the foundation rolled out the drums to celebrate the vision of Julie Useni, founder of the centre to create a safe space for them to thrive.
For 30 years, the foundation has been consistent in its mission of touching lives positively and committed to the noble acts of humanity. The center has empowered more than 2,000 women and girls to become self-reliant and provided support to vulnerable women. Gender advocates say amplified voices against gender-based violence will promote economic independence and foster inclusive society.
Giving a spotlight on its essential issues while placing it at the front burner of our collective drive for gender equality and women's empowerment in line with the 2030 Sustainable Developmental Goals.
We have a class which is called Citizenship and Human Trafficking class, which we teach them how to spot traffickers, how to avoid being trafficked, and then we let them catch up with the trends of social media and all, because like you said, a lot of people are now recruited through social media.
The students were equipped in various vocations, including catering, fashion, hairdressing, and other life-changing initiatives.
I'm so excited and I'm grateful to God.
I'm planning on building on myself more, and I'm also want to be like spreading the gospel and also be using my skill in doing things.
They recommend protection of women and girls from all forms of abuse and financial empowerment to drive social upliftment. In Abuja, Elizabeth Omori, NTA News.
Pioneer Director General of the Raw Materials Research and Development Council, Professor Oluremi Aribisala, has urged the federal government to invest in identifying and harnessing raw materials within local councils to boost the nation's economy. Noting that lack of policy consistency is a major obstacle to the country's growth, the former DG of the council said Nigeria needs more leaders with strong political will to continue with meaningful projects initiated by previous administrations. She was speaking at a special valedictory session in honor of the pioneering governing board chairman of the council and former president general of the Ohaneze Ndigbo, late Chief Emmanuel Iwanyamu in Abuja. Aribisala, who emphasized the importance of research in driving developments, observed that empowering local governments to harness their resources would provide jobs for the vulnerable.
There's a place for political appointment, and there's a place for those who have been trained, who have been prepared through years of exposure to make sure that this Nigeria, I believe, in this land of promise, the land with abundant resources, yet to be unlocked, right from the local government. I believe these things can only be done when we get the people in place, the people who we chose by merit in place to lead and to drive such projects.
In 1988,
Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, says it has just come to his notice that the police have arraigned those arrested in connection with the and bad governance violent protest in court for various offences, including treason. On this, the Attorney General says there are some issues his office will need to look into regarding the matter to enable him to make an informed decision. He said he is aware that the court has remanded the defendants in detention centres and adjourned the case to January, stressing that it is not within his power to vary the order of the court, remanding the defendants in detention centres and adjourning the case to January. He has, however, directed the Nigeria Police to transfer the case file to his office and hand it over to the Director of Public Prosecution of the Federation on Saturday, 2nd November. The Attorney General noted that he has further directed the DPPF to immediately put machinery in place for consideration of the court to bring the adjournment date forward. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Correctional Service refutes media reports that the suspects arraigned before Justice Obiora Igwatu of the Federal High Court, Abuja, for treason during the End Bad Governance protests of August 2024 were remanded in one of the adult custodial centres in Abuja. In a statement, the Public Relations Officer of the Nigeria Correctional Service, Abubakar Umar, says the service's operations are based on best correctional and global practices, and the suspects were rejected, and none of them was remanded in adult custodial facilities as being alleged. The statement further indicates that the Nigeria Correctional Service would continue to emphasize professionalism and respect for human rights in line with the United Nations minimum standard rules for the treatment of juvenile offenders. The broadcasting organizations of Nigeria have called on the federal government and security agencies to regard journalists and other media practitioners as essential partners whose roles are to make the government and its agencies accountable to ensure a stable, prosperous and egalitarian society. In a statement signed by the Executive Secretary, Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria, Dr. Yemisi Bangbushi, on this International Day of seeking an end to impunity and crimes against journalists, it is desirable to call on the government to reorientate the security agencies and other state actors on the roles of journalists and other media practitioners in making government at all levels accountable to those that gave them the mandate to administer the country on their behalf. Impunity and crimes against media practitioners such as unlawful arrest, invasion of media houses, brutality, harming, damaging of equipment, harassment and seizure of travel documents, sponsored attacks, kidnappings and killings of media practitioners will continue to portray the country in a bad light. In the Committee of Nations, and government should therefore act fast to discourage impunity and crimes against journalists. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure adequate security for journalists and other media officials while performing their legitimate duties. The Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria commends journalists and indeed all media practitioners on their roles of ensuring good governance, as well as promoting continuity and sustainability of democratic rule. A presidential candidate of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Dele Atumbi, says he will ensure transparency and accountability in running the affairs of the union if successful at the polls. He stated this at a meeting with media professionals in Jos ahead of the 2024 Triennial Delegates Conference in Owerri, Imo State. Ndanyang Andeabagyang reports.
As the NUJ presidential election approaches, one of the presidential candidates, Dele Atumbi, is visiting members to solicit their support towards victory at the polls. Here in Jos, the team was at the NUJ Press Center, where the leadership of the campaign team urged all to support Atumbi for transparency, accountability, and competence.
For us that are familiar with the working of this, the constitution of this NUJ that we use today has Mr. Dele Atumbi here as the lead drafter. And it modifies journalism, putting us on the right platform.
For the presidential candidate, it is time to improve the welfare of members as his leadership, if successful, will negotiate for media salary structure amongst other considerations.
Because from antecedents, you realize the issue of integrity, the issue of being focused and competence in ensuring that welfare of members is going to be protected.
Deputy Director News, NTA Network Center Jos, assures the presidential candidate of adequate support as he urges Atumbi not to compromise the welfare of members.
We are pleading with you to give our brother here your maximum support so that he can take NUJ to greater heights.
And it's good you are putting your case across. Do that, and let's hope that we can galvanize ourselves and get the best for our union so that our voice can be heard by government when it is the right time to do so.
That's all the time we have on the news on NTA International at this time. Many thanks for watching. I am Dennis Adigundoye.